What if I told you that women don't want just a charming smile or a flashy lifestyle? What truly makes them crave a man's presence, beg for his attention, is something deeper, something timeless, something rooted in ancient Stoic philosophy. In this video, we're diving into 7 attractive habits that make women beg for your attention, not through games or gimmicks, but through raw, disciplined masculinity. These aren't cheap tricks. These are habits forged through self-mastery, purpose, and unshakable confidence. The kind of habits that separate you from 99% of men who are out here chasing approval, pretending, performing, and still wondering why it never truly works. This is about becoming the kind of man who doesn't need attention to get it, a man who commands respect without ever raising his voice, a man who is attractive not because he tries, but because he is. If you're ready to stop chasing and start leading, if you're done being overlooked, then lock in. This video isn't just content, it's a call to rise. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's build a stoic mindset that makes women gravitate to you naturally, powerfully, and permanently. Let's begin. Habit number 1, unshakable composure. In a world that's always rushing, always reacting, it's easy to think that to get women's attention, you need to be louder, funnier, or more impressive. You might think you need the perfect joke or the perfect line to capture her interest. But the truth is, the most magnetic man in the room isn't the one who talks the most. He's the one who stays calm, grounded, and unshakable in the face of chaos. I learned this the hard way. I used to be the guy who walked into a room full of people and immediately felt that pit in my stomach, nervous, second-guessing myself, looking for any sign of approval. It wasn't just a bad habit, it was a deep insecurity I couldn't shake. I was seeking validation from everyone around me. I didn't trust myself, so I desperately tried to prove I was worth liking. But guess what? It never worked. People could feel it, women could feel it, and I was invisible, always chasing the next form of approval. But then something clicked. Imagine this. You walk into a room full of people, and instead of immediately scanning for approval, you just stand there, calm, unmoved, sure of yourself. You know your worth, and nothing, no comment, no look, no judgment, can shake you. And in that stillness, something incredible happens. People notice you, not because you're trying to impress them, but because you're not trying at all. You're present. You're confident in your own skin. That's what unshakable composure is about. Not needing to perform or chase after validation. It's about being so comfortable with who you are that you don't need anyone to tell you that you're enough. You know it. And the second you stop seeking validation, you attract it naturally. This isn't just about calmness. It's about a quiet strength that comes from within. A man who doesn't flinch when things go wrong. A man who doesn't crumble under pressure or chase after fleeting moments of attention. He stands tall in the storm. He remains composed when others lose their heads. That's what makes him magnetic, because real power doesn't shout. It sits quietly and lets the world come to it. This is where Stoic philosophy comes into play. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." What that means is simple. Don't let external circumstances control your inner peace. Don't let her reaction, her smile, or her silence dictate how you feel. When you gain control over yourself, your emotions, your reactions, your inner world, everything shifts. You stop being a man chasing after attention, and you become the kind of man who attracts it effortlessly. Think about it. How do you feel when you meet someone who doesn't need anything from you, who doesn't chase approval? It's powerful, it's magnetic. It pulls you in because they're so grounded, so confident in themselves, that you can't help but respect them. And here's the kicker. Women aren't looking for a man who's perfect. They're not looking for someone who never feels nervous. They're looking for a man who doesn't let that nervousness control him, who can stand in the face of rejection, stand tall when things go wrong, and keep moving forward with his head held high. That's the man who commands respect, the one who doesn't need to prove anything. He's steady, he's real. He's the kind of man who makes women beg for his attention because he doesn't need theirs. So ask yourself, do you have unshakable composure? Or do you let the world dictate how you feel about yourself? The moment you stop seeking approval and start trusting yourself, you'll discover something incredible. You'll become the man women can't resist, not because you try harder, but because you've learned to be unshakable. Habit number 2, purpose over pleasure. The depth they don't see coming is the depth they remember forever. Picture this: a crowded rooftop bar, string lights overhead, music pulsing just loud enough to keep everyone from hearing each other too clearly. Perfect for small talk, terrible for anything real. You're surrounded by people trying to look like they're not trying. Everyone's drinking, smiling, posturing. You can smell the effort. She walks in, elegant, self-assured, carrying herself like someone who's seen through more than her fair share of BS men notice. They always do, but they approach her with the same predictable energy. Compliments, cocktails, charm on autopilot. She's not impressed. You can tell. So when we finally sat across from each other, I knew I had one shot, and I didn't want to waste it on what every other guy had already tried. Instead, I leaned in, looked her dead in the eye, and asked, "What's something you believe in so strongly you'd risk being misunderstood for it?" Dead silence. Then a slow smile, not the polite kind, the kind that says, "Finally," someone who sees past the surface. And in that moment, everything shifted. We didn't flirt, we connected. Talked about childhood wounds, about failure, about why people ghost instead of having hard conversations. For 2 hours, we dropped the act and just existed with each other, raw and real. That night, I learned something powerful. Depth isn't just attractive, it's unforgettable. And yet, most men don't even tap into it because we've been sold a lie. That being entertaining is more important than being real. That witty one-liners beat honest questions. That sex appeal matters more than substance. But here's the truth. Charm might get her attention, but it's depth that holds it. Because any guy can memorize lines, mimic confidence, and play the role. But not every man can sit still in silence and ask something real. Not every man can share his truth without trying to calculate the reaction. Not every man is grounded enough in who he is to care more about meaning than validation. And that is what makes a man unforgettable. The woman from that rooftop? She messaged me the next morning, not because of what I look like or what I said, but because of how I made her feel. Understood, challenged, alive. That's the power of purpose. When you show up with something more than the need to impress, you become something women rarely see but deeply crave. A man with gravity. A man who doesn't chase pleasure, but builds a life around meaning. Women aren't starving for more entertainment. They're starving for connection, for presence, for men who think deeply, speak truthfully, and live intentionally. So to the man reading this, you don't need to be the funniest, richest, or most charming guy in the room. You just need to be real, grounded, purpose-driven. Because that man doesn't just win the moment, he stays in her mind long after the moment is over. Habit number 3, mastery of emotions. Lead yourself first and the world will feel it. We're not taught how to feel. Most men grow up learning that emotions are something to suppress, avoid, or numb. We're told to toughen up, get over it, or man up, as if Stoicism means silence and strength means pretending you're never hurt. But here's the truth that changed my life. Emotions are not the enemy. Being ruled by them is. Mastering your emotions doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you own your emotions rather than letting them own you. It means remaining calm in chaos, collected in crisis, and grounded when the world tries to pull you off center. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, I was in a relationship that tested my emotional stability. She had a fiery spirit, brilliant, intense, and passionate. But when things got heated, she'd go off like a storm. Old me? I'd match that energy. I thought standing my ground meant fighting fire with fire. But all it did was burn everything down. Until one night something shifted. We were mid-argument, voices raised, tension high. But instead of reacting, I paused. I took a breath. I didn't try to win. I didn't try to escape. I just stayed present. I listened, not to the noise, but to what was underneath. The fear, the vulnerability, the need to be seen. When I didn't meet her fire with more fire, but with calm, grounded presence, everything changed. Her defenses dropped. The conversation deepened. And for the first time, I realized emotional control isn't suppression, it's leadership. And let me tell you something real. Women feel this. On a deep, primal level, a man who can stay composed when everything is falling apart communicates something more powerful than words ever could. Safety, strength, maturity, presence. That's not just attractive, that's magnetic. But this isn't just about romance. Emotional mastery bleeds into every part of your life. In business, it means you don't make reckless decisions because your ego got bruised. In friendships, it means you can have hard conversations without burning bridges. In your personal growth, it means you're not running from discomfort. You're learning from it, and it starts with awareness. Most men don't even realize how reactive they are until damage is already done. One text, one moment of anger, one flash of insecurity, and now you're apologizing, regretting, trying to repair what emotional maturity could have prevented. That's why the work matters, the inner work. You begin by noticing your patterns, what triggers you, where you shut down, where you lose control. And you learn to sit with those emotions without letting them hijack your actions. You learn to speak truth without aggression, to stand firm without being rigid, to feel deeply without being led blindly. It's not easy. It's a lifelong practice. But every time you pause instead of explode, every time you stay open instead of shutting down, every time you respond with presence instead of impulse, you become more powerful, not in the loud performative way, but in the quiet, unmistakable way that real men carry. Here's what I've learned. The man who can lead himself emotionally will always have the edge. Because while most people are reactive, you become intentional. While others are thrown off course by every emotional wave, you stay centered. And while others are chasing external control, you master the only thing you truly can, yourself. That's the kind of man people respect. That's the kind of man women trust. And that's the kind of man you were always meant to be. So here's the challenge. Next time emotions rise, don't run. Don't lash out, don't fold. Stand your ground, not with force, but with calm. Not with control over others, but with command over yourself. Because true strength isn't loud, it's grounded, still, intentional. Master yourself, and you'll never chase power again. You'll be it. Habit number 4, speak less, mean more. The quieter you are, the more powerful your words become. Imagine this. You're in a crowded room, surrounded by voices and chatter. People are trying to impress each other, talking over one another, laughing loudly, trying to be heard. There's one man in the corner, though, sitting with a quiet intensity. He's not shouting to be noticed. He's not trying to fill every silence with words. He's just present. And then, at the right moment, he speaks. Not a word is wasted. His voice is calm, measured. He doesn't need to rush or fill space. The room grows quieter, as if everyone is suddenly attuned to his every syllable. And when he finishes, there's a stillness. The conversation doesn't rush forward. His words have weight. They matter, and the room feels it. You see, the most powerful men I've met, the ones who naturally draw people in, don't talk the most. They speak the least. But when they do, their words land like a hammer, not a pebble. I didn't always understand this. Back in my 20s, I was a chronic overtalker. In any group, I was the one who had to fill every pause, crack every joke, and ensure I wasn't left out of the conversation. I thought that if I talked enough, people would think I was interesting, funny, maybe even important. I wanted to be noticed, heard, liked. But then something happened. I was sitting at a dinner with a group of people I barely knew. As usual, I was the loud one, trying to dominate the conversation with humor and stories. But there was this one guy, a complete stranger to me, quiet, calm. He barely said a word all night. Then out of nowhere, he leaned in and made a simple, profound statement about the topic we'd been discussing. Just a few words, but they weren't just words. They were like a spark that made the entire room stop and think. everyone listened. And more importantly, everyone respected him for it. It was a wake-up call. I realized right then that true influence isn't about how much you talk. It's about how much meaning you pack into your words. The more you talk, the less people listen. The quieter you are, the more your words hold weight. Most people think that in order to be heard, they have to speak constantly. We're trained to think that the louder we are, the more attention we'll get. But this doesn't apply to men of substance. In fact, the opposite is true. When you speak less, people lean in. They start to pay attention to you, not just because you're quieter, but because what you say matters. When I was younger, I filled every gap in a conversation. I used my words as a shield, thinking if I didn't say something, I'd be ignored. But as I grew older, I started realizing the opposite was true. People listened more when I said less. I started to speak with more intention, weighing each word carefully. I learned to embrace silence as a powerful tool, because silence isn't empty, it's full of potential. Think about it. When someone says something too quickly, you barely have time to process it. But when someone pauses, when they take their time, you naturally start to lean in. You anticipate what's coming next. You're present in that moment, waiting for something important. And when the person finally speaks, their words have weight. This concept of speaking less, but meaning more, is incredibly powerful in relationships, especially with women. Women don't want a man who is constantly talking to fill the silence. They want someone who knows when to be quiet, who listens and who speaks with purpose. Think about the difference between a man who talks endlessly about himself and one who listens intently when she speaks, who offers thoughtful responses that show he's truly engaged. The second man not only captures her attention, he captures her respect. That's a man who understands the power of words. He doesn't just speak to be heard, he speaks to be understood. This also applies in leadership. A true leader knows that his silence is often more powerful than any speech. It's about commanding the room without dominating it. It's about knowing when to speak and when to let the silence hold the space. It's about creating moments where people are hanging on every word because they know that when you do speak, it's not filler. It's a truth that matters. To speak less but mean more requires a shift in mindset. It's about quality over quantity. It's about realizing that every word you say carries weight and that it's okay to be silent sometimes. Silence gives you time to think. It gives you space to listen and to understand. It lets you digest what's going on around you before reacting. It helps you speak with more wisdom, more intention. I know it can be difficult, especially if you've been conditioned to always be on, always talking, always trying to impress. But start small. Practice pausing before speaking. Take a moment to think about the impact your words will have. And remember, silence isn't awkward, it's powerful. So the next time you're in a conversation, try this. Say less, but mean more. Resist the urge to fill every silence. Let your words land and let people feel the weight of them. Show that you can speak with confidence, but more importantly, with purpose. Remember, the most magnetic men don't need to fill every silence with words. They know the value of restraint, the power of listening, and the impact of choosing their words wisely. You don't have to speak to impress. You have to speak to connect. When you learn this art, you'll find that your voice isn't just heard, it's respected. Habit number 5, ruthless self-respect. Imagine this. You walk into a room and without saying a word, you sense the shift in the air. The energy changes, eyes glance your way, not because you're looking for attention, but because your presence commands it. You don't need to try. You're not seeking approval or validation. You hold yourself with a quiet confidence that's unshakable. This is the kind of man women can't ignore. You've mastered ruthless self-respect. Now let me share how this plays out. I used to be the guy who was desperate to please. I would chase women, seeking their attention like it was a badge of honor. I thought that doing everything to make them happy was the key to winning their affection. But in reality, I was sacrificing my boundaries, my time, and ultimately my self-respect. And what did I get in return? Superficial connections that left me feeling empty, frustrated, and undervalued. Then one day something shifted. I began practicing ruthless self-respect, inspired by Stoic philosophy. I stopped seeking validation from anyone, including women. I stopped apologizing for the things I wanted and needed. I set clear boundaries in my life, and I became uncompromising about them. And that's when the change happened. When I began respecting myself first and foremost, everything else fell into place. Here's the kicker. Women started responding to me differently. It wasn't about the flashy things I could do for them or the attention I could give. It was the way I carried myself. The man who respects himself, who isn't afraid to say no, who doesn't compromise his values for anyone. That's the man women want. I remember one night, a woman I was dating called me to make last-minute plans. I had just gotten home from a long day, and I was dead tired. I had no energy left to go out, and I knew if I did, it would drain me. In the past, I would have pushed myself to go, just to keep her happy. But instead, I said, "I'm really tired tonight. I'll take a rain check, but let's reschedule." It wasn't an easy choice, but I stuck to my boundaries. She was surprised at first. "You're really not coming out?" "No, I'm not," I said, calmly but confidently. "I respect my need for rest right now. We'll plan something for another time." She didn't like it initially, but the next time we met, I could tell that she respected me more. The way I carried myself was different. I wasn't desperate for her approval anymore. I wasn't chasing her. I wasn't compromising my values for her attention. And that shift in energy, it made me more attractive to her. She started calling me, not just because I could entertain her, but because she respected the man I had become. And that's what real attraction is built on. Not seeking validation, but earning respect by living authentically. This is the key to ruthless self-respect. It's not about being arrogant or selfish. It's about recognizing your value and not tolerating anything less than that from anyone. Whether it's friends, family, or women you're interested in, when you value yourself like this, women will naturally be drawn to you. Think of it like this. A man who respects himself doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't need to constantly prove his worth. He doesn't need to go above and beyond to earn a woman's affection. He's already enough. And that self-assuredness is what makes him irresistible. When you embrace ruthless self-respect, you're no longer dependent on external validation to feel worthy. You're not seeking approval or chasing attention. You are solid in your own skin, and women, the right women, will respect you for it. So here's the challenge. Start practicing ruthless self-respect in your own life. Set your boundaries. Say no when you need to. Stop sacrificing your values for anyone. Women want a man who can respect himself above all else. And when you do that, you'll find that the attraction you seek will come naturally. When you command respect from yourself, others, especially women, will follow suit. Habits number 6, relentless self-improvement. Relentless self-improvement is about actively seeking to become better in every aspect of your life. It's not about achieving perfection, but about taking consistent steps to level up. Whether it's your physical health, your emotional intelligence, your intellect, or your career, this habit signals to the world that you're a man who values growth. Ask yourself, am I growing or am I stagnating? The truth is, women are drawn to men who are constantly improving. Not because they want to show off, but because they carry a quiet power that comes from pursuing their best selves. I'll tell you something personal. For years, I stayed in my comfort zone. I did just enough to get by, never pushing myself beyond what felt easy. I'd get the occasional attention, sure, but nothing substantial ever came from it. It was like floating in neutral gear. I wasn't moving forward, but I wasn't falling behind either. But then something shifted. One day I realized that I wasn't the man I wanted to be. I wasn't achieving what I could. And most importantly, I wasn't living with purpose or passion. I was just going through the motions. That's when I asked myself the hard question. What do I really want? Am I satisfied with where I am, or can I push myself further? I didn't want to just coast. I wanted to be a man who inspired respect and attraction, not just through surface-level charm, but through something deeper, my commitment to becoming better every single day. And that's when I started to truly pursue relentless self-improvement. This wasn't a dramatic overnight change. It started small, getting in better shape, reading more to expand my knowledge, setting bigger goals for my career, and pushing myself to get out of my comfort zone in all aspects of life. I kept asking myself, how can I improve today? What am I doing that's holding me back? The results weren't instant, but I began to feel a shift. As I focused more on improving myself, I noticed a different energy surrounding me. Women started to take more interest, not just in how I looked, but in who I was becoming. The transformation was clear. I wasn't the guy who needed external validation anymore. I was a man who validated himself through his growth. When you're on the path of self-improvement, it's not just about the accolades or the external results. It's about how you carry yourself. Women are drawn to men who are on a mission, who are constantly pushing their own boundaries. Ask yourself, do I have a purpose that drives me? Am I actively working toward becoming a better version of myself every day? If you're not actively improving, then you're settling. Women don't want men who are stuck or complacent. They want someone who is challenging himself, expanding his horizons, and showing up in life with a purpose and an ambition. When you live like that, you begin to attract not just attention, but respect and genuine connection. The best part? The more you focus on improving yourself, the more you realize that this is not about impressing anyone else. It's about building a life you're proud of and being the kind of man who doesn't need anyone's approval. Ask yourself, what's something I can do today to improve myself? And then make that small step forward. Whether it's starting a new habit, pushing your limits, or just focusing on personal growth, every effort counts. Over time, this will become who you are, a man on a constant journey of self-betterment. And trust me, this journey will make you incredibly attractive to women because it's rooted in something real. Women are naturally attracted to men who exude confidence and strength. And nothing shows confidence like a man who knows his worth and is constantly leveling up. Habit number 7, detachment from approval. Detachment from approval is one of the most overlooked yet powerful traits a man can cultivate, and it's deeply aligned with Stoic philosophy. In a world where most people are addicted to likes, compliments, and external validation, a man who is unmoved by the opinions of others is rare, and rare is attractive. This isn't about being cold or indifferent. It's about embodying a quiet inner strength, the kind that says, I know who I am, and I don't need your approval to feel whole. That's Stoicism in its rawest form, mastering yourself rather than trying to control others. And nothing is more magnetic to women than a man who doesn't flinch under the weight of judgment. Imagine this. You walk into a room full of people who are subtly trying to prove themselves through their clothes, their jokes, their fake smiles. But you're calm, still, grounded. You speak when you have something to say, not because you're afraid of being forgotten. You're not hunting for attention. You command it without effort. That's what detachment from approval does. And women sense it instantly. Not because you're trying to impress them, but because you're clearly not trying at all. There was a time I wasn't that guy. I remember constantly monitoring my behavior, on dates, at parties, even online. I was overly polite, overly accommodating, overly eager to be liked. And yes, it got me attention, but not respect, not desire. It wasn't until I burned out on people-pleasing and started living for my own values that things changed. I stopped chasing compliments. I stopped performing. And ironically, that's when I became more attractive. Why? Because I became more authentic. Women are drawn to a man who lives by his code, not by their approval. Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius taught that we should be indifferent to what we cannot control, especially the opinions of others. Attraction works the same way. The man who is most desired is the one who doesn't seek desire. He seeks truth, purpose, and inner peace. And that self-possession is magnetic. Let me be clear, this doesn't mean you're arrogant or emotionally unavailable. It means you've stopped basing your identity on how others perceive you. You're no longer a puppet pulled by social feedback. That's attractive, not just because it shows confidence, but because it shows freedom. And freedom, to a woman who's used to men bending over backwards for attention, is irresistible. So ask yourself, what would your life look like if you stopped needing to be liked? What kind of presence would you have if you could walk through rejection like a warrior through smoke, untouched and undeterred. That's the energy of a Stoic man. That's the kind of man who doesn't beg for attention. He makes women crave his presence because they can feel his independence. He doesn't chase approval. He leads with purpose, grounded in self-respect. And that, more than any pickup line or charm trick, is what makes him unforgettable. In the hierarchy of masculine attraction, detachment from approval isn't just another trait. It's one of the 7 core habits that make women beg for your attention, not through manipulation or bravado, but through deep, unshakable inner power. That's Stoic, that's rare, and that's what makes you irresistible. So there you have it, 7 powerful Stoic habits that don't just make you more attractive, they make you unforgettable. Remember, it's not about chasing women, it's about becoming the kind of man they can't ignore. A man of depth, discipline, and purpose. If this resonated with you, don't just watch. Apply. Start building these habits today. And if you're serious about leveling up your mindset and magnetism, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below on which habit hit hardest. This is the path of real masculinity. Quiet, stoic, irresistible. Thanks for watching. Now go live it.